Welcome back, everyone, to part 3 of Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. Today I'm going to be focusing on the chapter in her book titled Fear of Insurrection. It's specifically talking about what occurred during the time she was alive and the Nat Turner Revolt took place. I also went and found some articles independent of Linda Brent's, aka Harriet Jacob's book, discussing what took place during the Nat Turner Revolt and after. So, buckle up and let's continue our journey. Not far from this time, Nat Turner's insurrection broke out, and the news threw Linda's talent to a great commotion. She felt it was strange that white enslavers were filled with such severe fear. When word of Nat Turner's rebellion spread through the dusty, carriage-filled roads faster than a raging California forest fire in the summer. Why were white enslavers so scared when the consensus was their slaves were so content and happy? If slaves were content and happy to be their human dogs in chains, why were they so fearful? Why were white enslavers so fearful? The easy answer was they knew that 98.9% of enslavers weren't ish. They were cruel as the god, Satan, they served. And they feared to this day reaping what they've so gleefully, willfully sowed. Every white man shouldered his musket. The citizens and the so-called country gentlemen wore military uniforms. Poor whites took their places in the ranks in everyday dress, some without shoes, some without hats. Most, if not all, enslavers basically hid what was going on. They didn't want their slaves to know that there was a revolt happening, so they concealed it and made it seem like it was some kind of mustard holiday, some kind of tradition that took place at that time. And they had slaves, ex-slaves. I guess they liked doing it and they was excited about it. But Linda was one of the few that knew the truth, and she wanted to yell from the rooftops like, no, this is not what is happening. They're lying to you. There's a revolt going on. They're scared to let you know. But she knew that it was few people that she could trust with the truth. Many slaves, they feared being tortured and they feared the lash more than loyalty. By sunrise, bullies and poor whites poured in from every quarter to search they searched the houses of every slave. Nothing annoyed them more than seeing black people living in comfort and respectability. Linda made sure to arrange everything in her grandmother's house as neatly as possible. In other words, she was like, you don't like seeing us living better than you? Well, take this. You gonna come in here and you gonna see that we living better than you. Men were divided into companies of 16, each headed by a captain. Orders were given and the wild scouts rushed in every direction. Wherever a colored face was to be found, it was a grand opportunity for low whites who had no Negroes of their own to scourge. They exulted in such a chance to exercise a little brief authority and show their subserviency to the slaveholders, not realizing that the power which trampled on the colored people also kept them in poverty, ignorance, and moral degradation. Those who never witnessed such scenes could hardly believe what Linda witnessed that was inflicted on innocent men, women, and children who weren't guilty of committing any crime. Colored people and slaves who lived in remote parts of the town suffered in a special way. Some searchers grew gunpowder on black people and shot at their clothes, and then they would send other search parties after them, taking them into custody, supposedly having proof that they were a part of the insurrection. Everywhere, men, women, and children were whipped till blood puddled around their feet. Some received high 500 lashes, others feet and hands were tied as they were tortured with bucking paddles, which blistered the skin terribly. Colored people's homes, unless they were protected by some influential white person, were robbed of clothing and everything these shameless raiders could carry away on their filthy, sweaty backs. All day long, these shameful, cold-hearted people ran around like troops of demons, terrifying and tormenting the helpless. At night, they formed patrol bands, manifesting their brutal, sickening fantasies on every black person. Many women hid in woods and swamps to keep out of their way. If any of the husbands or fathers spoke against the barbaric actions, they were tied up to the public whipping post and cruelly beaten for telling lies about white men. Wow. And it's still that way to think about it. It's still that way today. If it wasn't for the amazing invention of a cell phone, much respect to Henry T. Sampson, who was the first black man who created the world's first cell phone. But as I was saying, if it wasn't for videos recorded on cell phones proving what black people were saying when we were talking about police brutality and what have you, they still would be like, oh, well, how much stake can you put into what a negress said? After all, you might as well believe pigs can sprout wings and fly if you're going to believe a negress. Black people were so brutalized and terrified that not two black people were seen talking together. You notice that still happens today? You notice, have you paid attention? Am I the only black person only person called black American who sees that? Have you ever noticed, like, you and maybe one other black person can be in a crowd, a sea of vanilla, and you guys walk past each other and you put your head down, or you look at everything but one another? You know that's an extension of slavery, right? You have to consciously break that ish. You have to break that, because that was ingrained in us. Oh, well, we can't be. You know, used to have laws where black people couldn't come together in a group. So we are the most targeted group on this earth. Anybody else can hang out in groups, but when we hang out, it's like, what those niggers talking about? Are they conspiring? They're trying to do another revolt? It's like they want a war revolt so bad. You know that saying, be careful what you ask for, you just might get it? Okay, let me continue. Linda wasn't concerned about their monstrous antics. As she and her family were surrounded by white families who protected them, Linda and her family were ready for whatever barbaric, dumb shenanigans the poor white heathens brought their way. It wasn't long before they heard the stumping of feet and high-pitched voices outside their home. The door was rudely pushed open, and in they tumbled like a pack of hungry wolves. They snatched at everything within their reach. Every box, trunk, closet, and corner underwent a thorough examination. A box in one of the drawers filled with some silver chain was pounced on. Linda stepped to the thieves to take it from them. One of the soldiers turned to her with a mask of anger on his beet red face. He so eloquently said, "What do you follow us for? Do you suppose white folks is come to steal?" Linda said, "You have come to search, but you have searched that box, and I will take it, if you please." At that moment, Linda saw a white gentleman who had been friendly towards them in the past. Well, friendly towards her and her family in the past. She asked him if he would come and be a witness as they searched their home. He quickly obliged. The search of the house was completed. They found not a thing. The group proceeded to the garden, where they knocked over every bush and vine. Haters. The captain called his men together. After a short consultation, the order to march was given. As they passed out of the gate, the wicked captain turned back around and said, "Linda's grandmother's house ought to be burned to the ground, and each occupant should receive 39 lashes. 39 lashes. I wonder where he came up with that number. But they came out of the ordeal unscathed. The captain wanted to burn down their home because they were too uppity for him. in my opinion. They should have been bowed down, in his opinion, shuffling their feet, barely able to form a comprehensive sentence. Again, do you not see traces of this godlike mentality today? And in recent years, black men being notoriously lynched due to white women lies, black men daring to carry themselves like they know they are somebody, or daring to be successful at business. There was nothing worse than a white man who felt threatened. Who wasn't made to feel like he is God who sits on the throne? If you insult who he think he is in his own eyes, your life was taken without any form of accountability. Tell me you don't still see that today. It's not as blatant as there were, like cave bandits with no morals and no sense of right or wrong. They just, whatever they wanted to do, they did it. And nobody said anything different. Even the ones who didn't condone what they did, they didn't say anything. So now they went underground. And you know the rest. Towards evening, the turbulence increased. Drunken soldiers committed even greater cruelty. Screams and shouts were heard throughout the town. Linda wasn't foolish enough to sneak a look out the door, but she did peep under the curtain. I'm sure she wished she didn't. She saw a mob dragging a group of colored people with muskets pointed at the colored people, threatening instant death if they did not stop. Fearful screams. Among the prisoners was a respectable old colored minister. They had found a few partials of shot in his house. I guess that was like maybe gunpowder or something, which his wife had for years. It was used to balance, or she used it to balance her scales. They threatened to shoot the minister on Courthouse Green. What a spectacle that was for a civilized country. A bunch of drunkard, illiterate, poor white men trying to take the law into their own hands because they were scared. The better class of the community exerted their influence to save the innocent, persecuted people, and in several instances they succeeded by keeping them shut up in jail till the excitement abated. When white citizens saw that their own property was not safe from the lawless men, they began pushing back, driving the drunkards away back into the country, and set a guard over town. See how they are quick to make moves when they are directly negatively affected? If they're not bothered, then at least most white folks think and say that your issues and problems are not their issues and problems. They're your issues and problems alone. But soon as they're affected, it's like, let's do the kumbaya. Let's come together. Can we all get along? Why are we still fighting? Why are you guys continuing with this racism? Black people, you're being racist. Because we're still talking about the things that you guys, your ancestors did in the past, that you're continuing on. That we still see remnants today. If I didn't see remnants of the past, like it says in the Constitution, I think 1865 or 1866 Bill of Rights, it says that racism is a badge of slavery. And, for people that, praise their ancestors, and always talk about obey the law, why is it that it's okay for you not to obey the law when it's involving black people? But if I didn't still see remnants or ramifications of slavery, we wouldn't still talk about it. But we see it daily. Constantly hearing stories about black people being discriminated. Black racist things happening to black people. Gentrification. The unfair legal system when it comes to black folks. Unfair hiring practices. We're hearing this all the time. Seeing it all the time. And then you guys want us to pretend like we don't see it. Until you're affected by it, then that's when you want us all to come together. Man, you better take that. The next day, the town patrols were ordered to search colored people that lived out of the city. The most shocking outrages were committed with perfect impunity. Every day I saw horsemen with some poor panting Negro tied to their saddles, forced by lashes to keep up with their speed till they arrived at the jail yard. Those who had been whipped too unmercifully to walk were washed with brine, tossed into a cart, and carried to jail. One black man who couldn't take the beatings promised to give information about the conspiracy, but it turned out that he knew nothing at all. He had not even heard the name of Nat Turner. The day patrol continued for weeks. Nothing at all was proved against the colored people, bond or free. The wrath of the slaveholders was somewhat appeased by the capture of Nat Turner. The imprisoned were released, the slaves were sent to their masters, and the free were permitted to return to their ravished homes. Visiting was strictly forbidden on the plantations. They couldn't even visit each other on the damn plantations. The slaves begged the privilege of again meeting at their little church in the woods with their burying ground around it. It was built by the colored people, and they had no higher happiness than to meet there and sing hymns together and pour out their hearts in spontaneous prayer. Their request was denied and the church was demolished. They were permitted to attend white churches. A certain portion of the galleries were appropriated to their use. When everybody else had partaken of the communion and the benediction had been pronounced, the minister said, "Come down now, my colored friends." They obeyed the summons and partook of the bread and wine in commemoration of the meek and lowly Jesus, who said, "God is your Father, and all ye are brethren." Now that's the end of her chapter, specifically talking about what it took place when Nat Turner revolted. I found this article independent of Linda's recount of what she witnessed, and I wanted to read a small part of the article. It's titled Nat Turner's Rebellion by the Bill of Rights Institute. I think it's billofrightsinstitute.org. I'm not sure. Yeah, .org. Whites quickly rallied from all directions. By the middle of the day on Monday, August the 22nd, several armed white groups were in pursuit. One small force encountered the rebels at a farm just outside Jerusalem. After a brief skirmish, the whites retreated. The rebels set off in pursuit, but were ambushed by a second group of armed whites who had been drawn to the sound of fighting. After this defeat, Turner's army was reduced to about 20 men. After another defeat on Tuesday morning, August 23rd, 1831, Turner was separated from the remnant of his army. The revolt was over. Whites from southern Virginia and parts of North Carolina regained control of Southampton within 2 days, but immediately after the revolt, whites throughout the country were on edge. As a result, they responded brutally. One newspaper editor who had traveled to Southampton County admitted that the white retribution was hardly inferior in barbarity to the atrocities of the rebels. Whites also reported using torture. Even enslaved persons who had helped whites were not necessarily safe. You see that? What I said in my other video about a dog being loyal. The black people who was enslaved that helped white folks wasn't safe from white folks. Ain't that a... Woo. For instance, white interrogators had not believed one enslaved man, Hubbard, when he told them he had saved his mistress from the rebels. They were about to execute him when his mistress appeared and assured Hubbard's tormentors his account was true. Another white person had to come in and save a black person because they didn't believe him. This is some bull still happening today. Tell me it's not. Everything that when you look at my videos and you see the things that I say still happens today. You prove me wrong. That they don't still treat black folks like this. A black person come and say something, they don't believe them until somebody white come and say they saw it too. That's an insult. You know what? I'm a sidetrack one for briefly. I know somebody who's very close to me that worked at a particular stationery company. I'm not going to say the name. But if I said nobody, I don't think anybody in this country or internationally would know what brand I'm talking about. But anyway, they worked at this establishment in Brentwood. the hoity-toity side of California, worked at this place, the stationery store, and she said that the majority of people that was coming in there stealing were the white-collar white folks. They was coming in there stealing stationery supplies. But black folks are watched and called the thieves. Anyway, let's go back. Slaveholders in Southampton soon realized the danger of an indiscriminate slaughter of blacks who were suspected. If any slaveholder could kill any enslaved person on a mere suspicion, the wealth embodied in slave property could disappear overnight. All they cared about is their money. They didn't give a damn if an innocent black person was going to be murdered by a bunch of scary white folks. They didn't care. They was concerned about their property, human property. As a result, soon after the revolt, the military and political leaders turned their attention to preventing the lynching of suspected blacks. About 36 blacks were killed without trial, violating even the pretense of a rule of law. See how law doesn't matter when it comes to white folks against black people? But whites achieved the goal of limiting the killing of enslaved persons because of their value as property. Damn, that's insulting. So in other words, if they didn't have value in these slaves, they wouldn't have cared if they went through town and killed them all. Just on GP, just because they was black and revolt happened and you look like Nat Turner, we gonna kill you too. That's how they do today. It's still the same thing. Guilty by association when it comes to black folks. But anybody else, it's like, oh my God, let's just sympathize with him for a minute. Come on, just put yourself in his shoes. How would you feel if this happened to you? Let me go back. As Richard Epps, a leader of the militia forces, later boasted, I put an end to this inhumane butchery in 2 days. Within a week, Epps had formalized the prohibition on killing blacks by proclaiming martial law. In this declaration, he promised to prosecute any white who killed an enslaved person not actively resisting white authority. You see how they got it twisted now? A man or woman could just be doing what the law tells them to do and still get murdered. You ain't even adhering to what your wicked ancestors did. In his declaration, he promised to prosecute any white who killed any enslaved person not actively resistant. How many people have you, black people, you seen not actively resist and still are buried 6 feet deep? Let me continue. By stopping the killing, white leaders ensured that the surviving rebels would be tried. The trials were by no means fair. The accused slaves were tried by an unsympathetic court of enslavers. But the most remarkable thing about them was the protections the court offered the accused. 30 enslaved persons, 1 free black, were convicted, but a dozen of them escaped the gallows when the governor, following the recommendation of the court, commuted the sentences of those who had contributed little to the rebels' cause. Others had their sentence commuted because they were young or reluctant rebels. In the end, Southampton executed 18 enslaved persons and 1 free black. You see why they don't want black folks to keep talking about the past? And then if you just base this on your regular individual life, we're not even talking about the past, we're not even talking about the wickedness of slavery. Just think about your personal life. If someone has done you harm or done wrong to you, and they never tried to make amends, they never tried to repair, like actively with a sincere heart repair the damage they caused, isn't it always going to be some kind of sore spot there? And yeah, you try to, you don't want to be bitter, you don't want to hold unforgiveness towards them, but at the same time, you're not stupid, you're not a fool. It's just going about their business like they're just running through a field of daisy, like they could care less what harm they inflicted upon you. Well, that's how it is with black Americans when it comes to slavery. You can talk all day long about how you feel about the wickedness and the violence of slavery, but your actions don't meet your words. The math ain't mathing. Oh my God, our ancestors did such a wicked and vile thing. But on the other hand, you're saying, F you and what you're going through. Reparations is a lost cause. We're not giving you a dime. We're going to hold on to every cent that our ancestors stole from you and built off the back of your ancestors. So dry up them tears, shut it up, and keep it moving. So you can't, you say one thing with your mouth, but your actions are different. And then you want us to just disappear off into the distance and let you be. No, we're not going to let you be. Good old white folks that go to church or pretend to know God, it says your debt, you got to pay your debts. You can't build a whole empire. This country is supposed to be the richest country in the world. And why you think so? Why you think this country is the richest country in the world? It don't have nothing to do with the wealth you built off of my people's back. It don't have nothing to do with that. You still have companies, corporations still in existence today off of slave money. I might do a video where I'm going to list every company that's still operating today in 2023 that was their foundation was built during the wickedness from the seed money that came from slavery. Oh, it's so disgusting. There's nothing fair about what y'all did. And you know what would have been cool is if when black folks basically freed themselves, because that's really what happened. It was too many revolts going on. Black slaves was like, I'm tired of this and I'm getting up out of here. They was burning down plantations. They was burning down farms. They was setting themselves free. So to save face, they came up with the emancipation. But slaves was already setting themselves free before that. Y'all need to stop lying and tell the truth. So they came and said, you know what, because of the hundreds of years of unfairness and brutality that was inflicted upon you guys, we're going to do right by y'all. We're going to give y'all some land. We're going to give every free man, woman, and child acreage. And we're going to give you some tools to help you build that acreage and sustain yourself. But they didn't want to do that. They kept invisible chains on black folks because they knew they got wealth. They built wealth too numerous to count off of the backs of black folks, that if they let black people be independent of them, and most of them didn't know what the hell to do, they learned from our people. Damn, we can't set them free and let them be independent of us, and all this knowledge they have that we didn't know, we gonna let them be independent of us? We can't do that. That's how we got rich. Anyway, thanks again for your time. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I will be back with part 4 as soon as possible. Be safe. Thanks again. God bless you. Take care.